Welcome back to the Deep Dive. We're here to sift through the sources on key topics so you get the real story. And today, we're diving into something that, well, frankly, it made me do a double take when I first heard about it. We're talking Australia, electric vehicles, and a specific road user tax just for EVs. It just feels so backward, doesn't it? With the big push for green tech, trying to get everyone into cleaner cars, and then tax go, but okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah, it really is a surprisingly complex, not to untangle. You've got environmental goals bumping right up against, economic realities. And then there's the whole legal side, too. What's fascinating here is just how many different threads come together. We've looked at government papers, industry takes, even high court decisions, policy analysis, the lot. Our mission today, explore all sides, all the arguments so you can really understand what's at stake. Because fundamentally, surely, we should be encouraging cleaner cars, right? Finding ways to support that shift, not penalize it. It's about respecting the environment, fostering cleaner air. That feels like the healthier path.
Absolutely. My first thought, my gut reaction was just, hang on, aren't we trying to incentivize EVs? Taxing them seems like hitting the brakes when we should be, accelerating towards cleaner transport. It feels wrong for where Australia needs to go.
You're definitely not alone there. That sentiment comes through strongly in some of the sources. Like, there's an article in The Driven, 10 reasons why Labor's proposed EV-only road user tax is bad policy. And it doesn't mince words. It calls the tax foolish, even a political dog whistle. It really goes head-to-head with this idea that EV drivers aren't paying their fair share, which, is often the justification, but the article argues it's just not accurate. Honestly, these kinds of policies can feel like an unhealthy distraction from the bigger picture, aiming for that cleaner, healthier future for everyone.
Foolish, wow. And political dog whistle, all the pretty pointed language. So what makes it seem so surprising or ill-conceived from their perspective? What are the specifics?
Right. So the article's first big point tackles what it calls the false assertion that EV drivers don't pay their fair share. Head on, it highlights that EV owners, like every other car owner, already pay into the system for road maintenance. They pay vehicle registration taxes, driver license fees that money supports state roads. And, if they own property, they pay local government rates, which helps fund council roads. These aren't extras, they're existing contributions.
But what about fuel excise? That tax on petrol. I mean, for years, the understanding was that's what pays for roads, right? Isn't that the dedicated road fund?
Yes. And this is where it gets really interesting, kind of an aha moment for a lot of people. The source makes it crystal clear. Fuel excise money in Australia. It's gone into general government revenue since 1992.
Since 92.
Yep. For decades now, it hasn't been specifically earmarked just for roads. So there's this huge gap between what people think and how road funding actually works financially. And that misunderstanding, it kind of fuels these arguments against EV drivers, even if they don't stack up when you look at the total picture. It's like we're stuck on an old idea that holds back progress.
That really does change the whole conversation, doesn't it? So if they're already paying through REGO and rates, and fuel excise isn't the road fund people think it is, what about the other benefits EVs bring, the things this tax might actually put at risk?
Exactly. And that's where the Driven article really digs in. It lists several big societal pluses from EVs that this kind of tax could undermine. First up, public health. Cleaner cars mean cleaner air. Less traffic pollution means lower government healthcare bills. Simple, right? There's a study they mentioned, UTA's Center for Clean Air attributes 1,800 premature deaths every year in Australia just to traffic pollution.
1,800, that's more than the annual road toll, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Staggering. So the argument is we should be incentivizing clean air, not penalizing the vehicles that help provide it. Then there's road safety. Lots of EVs come packed with advanced driver assistance systems, ADS. Think automatic braking, lane assist. These things are proven to make roads safer. Fewer accidents, fewer fatalities, lower costs for things like the NDIS, less lost productivity.
Right, those hidden costs of accidents add up significantly.
They really do. And the article leverages exactly that point. The health and economic upsides are huge, so why discourage the tech that delivers them? Thirdly, thinking bigger picture. Climate change and national security. More EVs mean fewer emissions damaging the climate, which helps reduce the financial hit from extreme weather fires, floods, you name it. And for national security, reducing reliance on imported fossil fuels makes Australia more self-sufficient, especially vital in emergencies. We've got sun, we've got wind, let's use them.
Okay, so the case against isn't just about whether EV drivers pay enough tax already. It's that taxing them actively works against national goals on health, safety, climate, even security.
You've nailed it. That's the core argument. And beyond those big goals, the article points out other taxes EV drivers do pay. GST on the electricity they use,
Mm.
GST on the car itself, which is often pricier, even luxury car tax on high-end models. There's a quote from Kath Davies. She was involved in that high court case we'll get to. She said, "Now is not the time to tax electric vehicles. It is the time to do everything possible to encourage people to switch to cleaner cars." On. It's a really clear call for policies that help, not hinder, this shift, which just feels like the smarter, healthier choice for Australia's future, doesn't it?
These are definitely strong points for why we should want more EVs, but the how policy gets made without hitting snags, that's where it gets tricky. All right, let's pivot a bit. Let's talk about the legal side, because this is where it gets really interesting. Victoria actually tried this, didn't they? An EV road tax. What happened there?
They did, yes. And it hit a major constitutional wall. In October 2023, the High Court ruled on Vanderstock v. the State of Victoria. The court basically said Victoria's ZLEV charge, that zero and low emission vehicle charge, was invalid. That was the one charging 2.8 cents a kilometer for full electrics and hydrogen and 2.3 cents for plug-in hybrids.
Invalid.
Huh?
On what grounds? This sounds like it could stop other states trying the same thing.
Absolutely. It was huge. The High Court decided the charge was technically an excise duty, and under the Australian Constitution, only the federal government, the Commonwealth, can levy excise duties, not the states. It's a fundamental separation of powers thing, designed way back at Federation. So yeah, this ruling effectively slammed the door on states like NSW and WA, which has similar EV tax plans in the works. It set a really strong precedent.
Okay, so the states are blocked, but federally.
Hmm.
People like Tanya Plibersek, the Treasury Jim Chalmers, they've called an EV road tax sensible.
Okay. So if it's so controversial and states can't do it, why is the federal government still talking about it? What's their angle on road funding? Well, the federal government is looking at a pretty stark economic reality. The main reason is the massive drop in fuel excise revenue. That tax on petrol and diesel, it used to be a huge source of federal money. But FCAI data, that's the car industry body, shows excise collected per vehicle dropped over 40% between the early 2000s and 2019.
40%. Wow. Why is such a big drop?
Two main things. Cars becoming way more fuel efficient, and of course the rise of EVs, which use no petrol or diesel at all, so no fuel excise paid. This shrinking pot of money hits the federal budget hard, right when they need funds for growing challenges. Think population growth, city congestion, which kills productivity and ups emissions, and road safety results kind of plateauing, all need funding.
So it's a genuine budget hole they need to fill somehow.
It is, and you could see the states trying to plug that gap themselves before the High Court stepped in. New South Wales, for example, had proposed its own fair and sustainable road user charge. It was meant to eventually cover all drivers, but it had specific rates ready for EVs and plug-in hybrids, around 2.97 cents kilometers for BEVs, 2.38 for PHEVs, kicking in from 2027 or when EVs hit 30% of sales. So the states were definitely feeling the pressure to find new revenue streams. The High Court ruling really changed the game.
So the whole funding model based on fuel is creaking, not just because of EVs, but efficient petrol cars too. What about the car industry itself? Do they have a solution, an alternative idea?
They do, actually. The FCAI, the Federal Chamber of Automotive Industries, they've been quite vocal. They're pushing for a nationally consistent road user charging system fit for the 21st century. But, and this is the crucial bit, they say it needs to apply to all vehicles, not just singling out EVs.
Okay, so a universal charge, not an EV-specific one. What's their reasoning?
Their argument is basically twofold. One, it would replace clunky, inefficient existing taxes. Two, and importantly, it avoids specifically penalizing EV adoption. They argue that targeting only EVs would absolutely slow down the transition to cleaner vehicles. The FCAI even sketched out principles for how it could work. Charge based on distance, vehicle weight, maybe location, like higher charges in congested city centers, and even time of day, charging more during peak hours.
And did they suggest a rate?
They floated an indicative figure around 4.6 cents per kilometer as something roughly equivalent to what a typical driver might pay in fuel excise now.
Interesting. So this whole idea of moving away from fuel tax to charging per kilometer, it's not exactly brand new, is it? Sounds like it's been kicked around for a while.
Oh, absolutely. For years. Major reviews, the Henry Tax Review, reports from the Grattan Institute, Infrastructure Victoria, they've all been saying for a long time that Australia needs road pricing reform. They've consistently pointed out that the current fuel excise model is outdated, inefficient, and unsustainable. So this isn't just a sudden reaction to EVs, it's part of a much longer conversation about how we fund our roads properly for the future.
Right. This whole tax thing is clearly super complicated, trying to juggle budgets, fairness, environment, all sorts. But stepping back for a second, with all this going on, how is Australia actually doing on EV uptake and emissions compared to, say, elsewhere? Where do we sit globally?
Yeah, that's a really important question. And honestly, the picture isn't great. According to one source comparing our vehicle emissions policies with Europe's, the research found Australian cars are generally bigger, heavier, and less efficient. On average, they pump out about 43% more CO2 than cars sold in the EU.
43%. That is a huge difference. What's driving that?
Well, the main factor, according to the source, is policy. Europe has had mandatory CO2 emission targets for car makers for over 15 years now. Those targets have really pushed manufacturers to sell more EVs and improve efficiency across the board. Australia, on the other hand, we've relied more on voluntary standards, which are just less effective. Plus, get this, we still use an official emissions test cycle, the new European drive cycle, that dates back to the
The
1970s.
70s.
Seriously. It was designed for much simpler cars and doesn't reflect modern driving patterns like city traffic or higher speeds. This means there's a big gap between the official lab test results and what happens in the real world. In Australia, that gap is maybe 30–35%. In Europe, it's more like 15–20% because they use more updated tests. And for plug-in hybrids, it's even worse. Real-world emissions can be 3 or 4 times higher than the official figures, mainly because people don't drive them in electric-only mode nearly as much as the tests assume. So relying on these outdated standards means we're not getting an accurate picture, and it's definitely not pushing us towards the kind of real-world improvements needed for our climate goals. It just feels, well, unsustainable.
Wow, okay. That paints a pretty stark picture.
Okay.
So given that gap in the outdated tests, what does the research say Australia needs to do to actually hit its own CO2 targets?
The research is pretty blunt. It suggests Australia needs EV sales to hit something like 60% of all new car sales by 2029.
60% by 2029, that's ambitious.
It is. And it won't happen just by setting an emissions standard on its own. The message is clear. We need a whole package of complementary policies. Yes, strong standards, but also things like incentives to help people buy EVs, serious investment in charging infrastructure. And crucially, we need to update those official test procedures to reflect real driving. Europe's already doing things like using onboard monitors to track actual fuel and electricity use. We need to catch up. It has to be this kind of joined up, holistic approach if we're serious about moving from just talking about targets to actually achieving them. It's vital for building that cleaner, healthier future we keep talking about.
It's definitely clear that balancing the budget, environmental targets, fairness for drivers,
Yeah.
it's a massive juggling act.
It really is, and it needs careful, forward-looking thinking, focusing on long-term health and sustainability, not just short-term budget fixes that might actually undermine those bigger goals.
So what does this all mean for you listening in? We've heard the strong arguments against taxing just EVs, highlighting their benefits for health, climate, even security, and that drivers already pay various taxes. We've seen the High Court basically rule out state-based EV taxes, saying only the federal government can impose that kind of excise duty. That really puts the ball in the federal court. And yet, we've also heard the very real problem. Fuel excise income is dropping, and the government needs a sustainable way to fund roads for everyone.
Exactly. So the fundamental question for Australia now isn't really if we need a new way to fund roads, because the current system is clearly becoming outdated. The question is how. How do we design a system that's national, fair to everyone, and actually supports the vital shift to cleaner transport? We need something that doesn't slam the brakes on progress or feel like a step backwards for the environment we all share. It needs to build a future where we have both well-maintained roads and cleaner air that benefits everyone. It's about showing a real commitment to our planet and our collective health.
So here's something to think about. Given Australia's climate goals, the High Court's ruling, and the clear need for long-term road funding, what is the fairest, most effective way forward? How can Australia fund its roads for the future without slowing down the essential move to cleaner, more sustainable transport? It's a question that really forces us to balance the asphalt under our tires with the quality of the air we all breathe.